Hello and welcome to the Wild Wonder podcast, where we seek to democratize and demystify holistic wellness practices by speaking with today's leading practitioners. Today, we're doing something new. We're having a part 2 of our original, the Akasha and Spiritual Sovereignty, with the Divine Void's Sophia Hornyak. So welcome back. I'm happy to see you so soon.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So where we left off in our last conversation was kind of defining spiritual sovereignty. So just to backtrack a little bit, could you give us your definition of spiritual sovereignty?
So, in my definition or the way I kind of look at things is that I relate us to being kings, queens, sovereign, ruling our kingdom. And our kingdom is what is in the nature or in the field of our lives, the archetypes of different aspects of ourselves. When they say that a sovereign is appointed by God, well, we are also appointed by God, meaning there's a divine peace or connection that lives within us or not within, because really our body is so limited. It's really who we actually are. And so what I explained before is, different monarchs can have the best support system, they can have the best defense system, they can have all these things, but it's really up to their own discernment on how they want to operate, how they want to create the harmony within their kingdom and how their kingdom interacts with others. And that is ultimately tied to the person or being that is appointed by God, your sovereign being. So, sovereignty to me is being able to rule that kingdom in harmony with the best information that you have at that moment to the best of your ability.
Right. And I think in contrast, we can't be sovereign and a tyrant. And what I mean by that is
Right.
there is a limit to where we can encroach upon another person's kingdom. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I really think that people have this idea of rulership or ruling as, I'm in charge, but really a true sovereign is in service. You're in
Mm.
service of the needs of what each archetype, each little aspect of your life and not only that, but the communication and relationships that you have with other kingdom, you're in service to that. How do you
Mhm.
create harmony to the best of your ability?
Yeah, I think that's a piece that's been missing for so long. I am taking a class I just finished with Alexander John Shia, who's a theologian or a Catholic mystic. And he was explaining, he used the secret. I'm sure we could all remember the
Mhm.
secret. And he said a piece was missing. We went from like hearing the call to like wading through the wilderness to to finally achieving or recognizing what we were being called to do. But then we stayed in that kind of euphoria
Mm-hmm.
of creation and then didn't move on to service, community, and the other.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. And it's funny you mentioned that because right now I'm in the middle of rereading Madame Blavatsky's book, um, Isis Unveiled. And, she's a very conflicted figure in history, but ultimately, what she talks about is kind of like going past the true this very human idea of what we
Mhm.
think it means and getting past it and going to what the oracle within says. And I think that oracle is of service because it's connected, and that's all about like harmony. It's creating that harmony between the oracle within and outside and hearing that call and like in kirtan, your call and response. So
Mhm.
um I think that is a very big piece of service of being in connection versus, okay, I got the call, so this is what I'm supposed to do, and just putting energy out. We learn in mystic Kabbalah that a true magician isn't one that like puts out energy constantly. or
Mhm.
pulling in energy. There's a infinite movement of energy, and that's, the harmony and the service and it all.
Right. And I think you touched on something there. Maybe you didn't mean to, but it reminded me of the um, the need for discernment. Right. So
Mhm,
there's what the oracle says, and then there's what the ego says. So
mhm.
how do you discern between the two?
That's practice, honestly. I think that sometimes the ego gets a bad rep. The ego is there to be the confine, to be the edges. So I always like to say, like, the ego is like the kindergarten teacher. That's like, okay, well, I know you know how to play in the sandbox. So we're going to stand here while you play in the sandbox. And as you grow and you evolve, you say, well, I would also like to play on the slide. So then the ego takes a step back and says, okay, well, you know how to play on the side and you know how to play in the sandbox. So that ego is kind of there to kind of keep you um, almost like protected in a
Mm-hmm.
way to what you already know. And
Right.
I think the ego grows with us. So it does get a bad rep, but it's only your patterning. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the cool thing about my work and what I'm practicing is like all of this mystic stuff. I'm also like connected it to Carl Jung, which really
Mm-hmm.
talks about de-patterning and opening yourself up to that true notion of what the self is. So if we practice getting in touch with this sovereign piece of ourselves, with this true calling, or whatever, however you want to call this little
Mm-hmm.
piece, we start to move that ego back anyways, then it becomes a practice of understanding like what is ego and what
Mm-hmm.
is that, and not necessarily all the time is ego bad. It's just what we
Right.
already know.
Yes. And the mystical path, which I believe is what we're speaking to, moves us away drastically from what we already know. So oftentimes, I don't know if it's been your experience, but it's certainly been mine, that there's been a crumbling. You hear the call, and then your life collapses, kind of like the tower moment in the tarot. Like there's uncontrollable forces that either force you to move, or your own ideology causes you to move in a way that your life must change from what you're used to.
I'd agree with that to an extent. I think that when we work on the mystic path, we also can look at the ego or that patterning and say, well, that was there for a reason. And
Mm.
that's that, being able to see it from that lens of like, that brought me to this, or this
Hmm.
taught me this lesson, or, I think that the mystical path allows us to see the place in which everything belongs in nature.
Right. And I think going back to the aspect of sovereignty, I think now more than ever, I'm seeing it right more, not just on social media, but in conversation and with other mystics and other practitioners, this call to be of service, but in a way that's different than what at least I've seen in my lifetime before, which is more like the guru, right?
Hmm.
Like you wanted to follow a guru or a teacher or a master. And if you were a teacher, you were almost, I don't want to say forced, but kind of made to feel like if you weren't promoting yourself in a way as a master or a guru, then there was something wrong in what you were doing, or there was some kind of aspect of your self-worth that wasn't working and you didn't see yourself in that way. Where I have never felt comfortable being the guru figure, right? I always say I'd rather be a guide on the side to kind of help someone go through their path than to be like the teacher to work towards. And I think that speaks to this now as in terms of spiritual sovereignty, right? You're not saying follow this practice. You're directing people back to themselves.
100%. We talked about in our last interview how both you and I share this, like, oh, don't tell me what to do. Like, I'm going to do the complete opposite. And I think there's a lot of us that are like that. There's a reason why our generation is very much like that. We also are coming up on another generation that was told what they wanted to do constantly, and they were
Mm,
completely unhappy.
yeah.
And so we fought to be like, no, what is wrong? Why do I not feel good? Mental health is
Mhm.
important, all of these things. And I think there's a reason to that. We always want to look at things as above, so below, macro, micro, right? And I think that, again, with Carl Jung, it's individualization, individuality. The thing that is important within us, the thing that feels restrained, constrained, restricted, is screaming to come out. And a lot of
Mm,
us are recognizing this. And for me, I came to this place looking, right? I was looking for the
mm,
teachers. I was looking for the guru. I was looking, but I never felt like I quite fit, because there would be a piece that I liked or
mhm,
I understood and respected, but it didn't just click for me. And I thought, well, you know, um, I had this moment when I was a kid where we were talking about religion, which I don't know
mhm.
why fifth graders were talking about religion, but we were. And I was like, well, I believe that there's truth in probably everything, but it has to belong to you. And I don't know
Mm.
how I came up with that, right? So that has to be a past life thing. But it's not wrong. I still
Right.
truly believe that. So, just because one path is written out one way and we look at language and symbolically, these things have multitudes of meaning. I
Mhm,
think when you adapt it to this individual filter, it might mean something completely different to somebody else, but that's of importance because there's something within that needs to
mhm,
come out to affect the larger scale of the universe. And so I think that sovereignty, that saying like, no, I need something. I need
mm,
to define what I am. I need to define what service means to me. The I am is very
mm,
important in this, I guess, linear time and space,
mm.
but overall affecting the rest. I hope, hopefully that answered the question. I kind of
No,
went,
no, it made sense to me.
okay.
I don't know if we just think different, but I hope it makes sense to everybody else. What I would like to know is how you're able to use this new practice that you're now teaching or about to teach,
Yeah,
how this practice helps others to find that place within themselves.
sure. So during this whole time that I've been looking for this modality and waiting for this to come through, the practice is called the gateway. That is what they gave me, and that is what they want. I tried to understand what that meant. And again, language and symbolically, it means so many things.
Mhm,
But I think, Ram Dass says something like, you don't worship the gate, you worship in the inner temple. And I think that's this gateway allows people into their own inner temple.
mhm,
A lot of my clients that I work with are so freaking connected and powerful and in tune, like it is mind blowing.
mhm,
And I get a lot of, well, I'm not sure, or I'm scared, or I don't know what this means. And I was like, okay, something has to be out there. There has to be something that helps people trust.
mhm,
And in my own life, I've lived through abuse, rape, poverty. I've been in so many bad places, but it was always this voice and this inner knowing that always got me to the place that I am now.
mhm,
The life I live, the love that I have, the home that I own are like way beyond anything I ever thought I could ever have, but
mhm,
I listened. And so part of the reason I went to this call of service was that I wanted other people to know that, like, if you just tune in, you are worth it. And they're telling you you're worth it and they will help
mhm,
you. You just have to be willing to listen. So in this gateway practice, it's kind of a 4-part class.
mhm,
Basically, what I am trying to do is help people understand how to navigate, because I think there's a lot of teachers out there teaching certain things, and then
mhm.
people get into the class and they're like, well, I don't know which one's my voice. I don't know which one is this. So the
Right.
navigation aspect is missing for sure. So
Mhm,
class one is about individualization, or individuation, language, the nature of your nature. What is in your field? What connects to you? It's kind of like, as a conduit, I use that word, and sometimes we see it out there, but people that work with me, it's almost like they their vision is a little fuzzy, so they know there's stuff there,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't see. And I'm just glasses. Everything just boldens.
Mm-hmm.
So we amplify what's in your field and we talk about what is trying to communicate with you or co-collaborate with you, understanding that you are sovereign, that you can work back, understanding what language and symbols mean, and not saying like this equals this, but rather how does it equate to you? Practices that you can have so that you can start to develop your own grimoire and dictionary and um, language definition for yourself. The second part of it, we attune to what is in your field. So we're not necessarily attuning to the Akashic records or like, a Reiki attunement. We are bringing you in harmony with what is in your field, your own pathways. So this class is more of we are actually in the zone. We are going into whatever you want to call it, trance meditation,
Mm-hmm.
journeying, and I will be prompting vibrational questions and you will be retrieving the answers and we will talk about that. Um, there will be an energetic aspect to it, so you will feel some things. And then the third class, we talk about opening, closing, and warding, because again, ultimately, you are in charge of when this information comes in. When you want to fully open the gates, how you want to leave them open, or maybe just ajar. This
Mm-hmm.
is You're in charge of this stuff. And I want to help people gain that sense of trust and not necessarily control, but again, sovereignty, when
Mm-hmm.
you're not like at the mercy of when information wants to come in.
Right.
And going back to class one, we do talk about the language in nature. So they will still be talking to you outside, but it's a different, it might be a different dialect that you might have
Mm-hmm.
to learn. Um, then the next step into it, they call it the king's ties, which to me, I keep telling them that feels a little masculine to me, but but that's what they want to call it. So it's really cool how I discovered this. And again, going back to Madame Blavatsky's Isis Unveiled, she has this line where she talks about we will be going back to ancient scriptures and writings and redefining and evolving them. And so when I went on this crazy goose chase finding the puzzles, I was looking in through the lesser and greater keys of Solomon. I was looking through John Dee's Enochian grimoires, and I noticed like in the Hermetic magic field, there's something they call the seven spheres. These are the
Mm-hmm.
ancient planets. If you look in through the book of Enoch and Revelations, they talk about the seven angelic beings that sit at the throne of God. This is all language stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And in Heptarchia, this is the same seven angels that work into the seven ancient um, spheres or planets that actually rule over the universe. That's a lot, right? And that's really heavy. Ultimately, what I did is through research and cross finding the different or fine tuning the different language with it and the rituals. What this part of it is this is sort of like a alchemical marriage or resolving of these seven different archetypes within ourselves. So, there's
Mm-hmm.
parts of us that we doubt. There's parts of us that we lack support in. One of my favorite ones that I went through was Mars. And Mars, we think of what with Mars? Like we think of
Like
like
war.
war, right? Well,
I'm an Aries, so I'll say wisdom.
Yeah. I'm an Aries rising, so that's how I step forward. No, but Mars is also assessment. Mars is your defenses. Mars is discipline, protection, security. Mars is how we move. So um, it's funny, I got to this part of the ritual and they stopped me, and I thought I was going to move. Like, I thought we were
Mm,
doing this every other week, and they're like, no, we're going to hold you for a month. And I noticed there was it was almost like I was reorganizing, which feels like a very mercurial thing, but it's not. If you
mm,
think of things in terms of, the military, it's
mm,
reorganizing things, assessing where they are, and creating new defenses. Because when we work in new areas of energy, old systems don't work anymore.
mm,
Um, so in the King's Ties, we are just again, it's like an alchemical marriage, or resolving the parts of you that just need a little more strength and help through
mm,
the different ancient spheres or their angelical rulers. So again, that does sound heavy and really far out there, but ultimately, once you've done the first three classes, these are just a series of ritualistic practices, and
mm,
then it's like you're just watching what happens, and you start to write down and recognize the different shifts and changes. And I think that really brings you to like a different level of self by the end of it, because not only are you now, like, I've developed my language, and or some of it, because it's always
mm,
evolving. I developed some of my language. I know who I'm working with. I know what path is working for me right now.
mm,
um, you might get 2 years into that and go, I want to do this again. I want to do this practice again.
mm,
Or, I moved into a different path. So I know this practice in the back of my head. I know how to relearn the language. I know how to communicate, when to shut things down, when to open them up. And maybe I might want to do this ritual again to rework
mm,
my defenses, how I take authority or maybe responsibility. There's different shifts in different parts of our lives, where maybe in one part of my life I want to be more of the student, and then the next I want to be more of the
mm,
teacher. Doing these practices, what we're saying is we're amplifying to the universe, like, hey, we want to work with you, and I'm asking for your assistance.
mm,
Now, the main part that I took, or the main practice that this is based off of, is heptarchia, which is the lesser
mm,
known Enochian magic. So it is under the seven angelic rulers. Each sphere or direction, depending on what tradition you're from,
mm,
has a king, a prince, and their ministries. So though the angel is in charge of that sphere, below them they have who is in service, and those are who works directly with us. This has a lot to do with timing. This has a lot to do with the
mm,
day. So it's discipline. um but my God, has it changed, like, even the way that I speak? Has it changed the way that I communicate? But I think that this is something that is needed, so that we can see in action that we are working with rather than working for or
mhm.
hoping for.
Right. It's a more of a knowing. But going back to, you mentioned Mars, are these energies or spheres attached to planets, or are you using them more archetypally, so that if a person was thinking in terms of planets, they
Mhm.
would imagine a planet like Mars?
So it is archetypically, typically,
Mhm,
but we do work with the movement of time of the planet, because even
mm,
though it's an archetype, it is also in relation to what it is represented by. So, for example, if we work with Mars, we would work on a Tuesday, and I would look
mm,
at the timing of the day to work a Martian hour at Mars,
mhm,
and that's when I would start to do the work. or I would start the ritual, but it would go
Mm.
throughout. So basically, whoever's working with me, whether you're in Canada or you're in England or you're in the Philippines, we would base this off of the time of where you are at.
Okay.
And again, that is representative of the old school of discipline, of saying like, I am of service, I am
Mm.
open, and I am willing to do the work. It's a humbling piece, but there is so much strength in it, because what you're saying is, I'm also drawing you in, I'm also calling you
Mm.
in, which I think is really cool. This kind of like, in Kabbalah, we would say like Hesed and Gabura, this like softness and strength all coming together in Tiferet, which is the sun, and Tiferet represents the fallen sun, or how Osiris was broken apart and then put together. So this is kind of breaking you apart and putting you together all over again.
Yeah. I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but it's also when
It's
you said
heavy.
that, like the the humbling part made me think of like in voodoo and practices, you would never like outright ask for help from a spirit that you haven't humbly like introduced yourself to, or like
Mm-hmm.
brought offering to, or made yourself available to. I'm not a voodoo practitioner, but from what I've read, is because or not, that spirit is just not going to work with you. There is a give and take, a reciprocity to that.
Yeah, working in folk magic, yeah, there's that level of like introduction. You're just being polite ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But if we think about this on this like higher level of service, there's a humbleness to it, because you're of service of something greater. And so even though this is helping you with your own sovereignty, your own level of trust, your own
Mm-hmm.
attunement with the divine within yourself, on a macrocosmic level, what you're doing is you're saying, I am willing to be a channel for more of this astral light into our dimension. And so that can only bring more light into the world. There's bigger and deeper context to this that I understand, but again, this is already a lot to wrap anybody's brain around
Right.
this. But if we want to simplify it to that, if you look at us as a net and each of us are intersections, and we're just little lights, we're just saying like, we want to brighten, we want to open up
Mm-hmm.
more. And I think that is humbling in itself, like getting this information. I was talking to my Akashics teacher, and I was talking to my Hermetic Kabbalah teacher, and both of them, I kept saying like like, who am I to get this, like, who am I? And they're like, well, this is the whole point. Like, who
Mm-hmm.
are you? Like, there's a reason for this, if you were walking around like, yeah, I've got this, I've got, it wouldn't have the same message. So, um, you know, I do feel that way, as much as this is giving me a lot of strength, as much as I feel so strongly and raw about this work and very protective of it. I am very like excited that I think this
Mm-hmm.
can help a lot of people just at the base level trust. Um, I am like still constantly mind blown that this kind of stuff comes into my field, that they are directing me to this information, that they are showing me the way, they are telling me how to develop this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's crazy. Like, I mean, like who am I to be looking at National Archives in England to find, John Dee's old grimoire, like I'm not,
Right.
it's mind blowing to me. I'm just Sophia from South Hill, Virginia, who, you know, like dropped out of college, dropped out of beauty school. Like, who am I, but that humbling is just
Mm-hmm.
that, who are you? It's a blank page, I think.
Yeah, but I think that humbling is what allows, right? Because if you're the type of person that says, I know, well, then nothing else can come in.
No,
That's
that's
not nothing's
a
gonna come
very good
into your
point.
field if you're like, "Oh, I already know," you know?
Yeah.
I got it.
A very valid point.
But I'm wondering, so I meet a lot, at least when I first started teaching, I would meet a lot of women mainly. I'm not saying men don't go through this, just in my experience, it was the women that didn't quite know what it is they wanted to do. They didn't know how they wanted to move forward.
Mhm.
Are these the type of people that are coming to this work, or are you seeing a difference nowadays in who's coming to the work?
I think in the beginning, when I would read, it was always somebody saying, like, I feel like I have to be of service. I feel this pull. And after a while, I came to this like conclusion that like service may just look different, right? We talked about the
Mm,
formula of success before. So what we saw was I'm a tarot reader, I practice this
yeah.
way, then I had an Instagram, and this is how it all succeeded. Well, where is the room for individuality? Where is the
Hmm.
room for revolution and revolutionary ideas? There are
Hmm.
people out there and clients of mine and people that feel so scared and confined by this idea of success or what it means to be of service or what it means to be spiritual, that they don't speak up because it's too weird or it's different.
Hmm.
We need to allow space for these things to come through. And
Hmm.
so when I see like people bogging other people down, well, you need to do your research, you need to do, it's not all through research always,
Hmm.
it's sometimes it is the divine, that lightning crash that comes through that breaks down our tower. That is the divine eminence that we are looking towards, that we are wanting to bring in the more information. So, when people are coming and they're like, I don't know what to do with this, like this work isn't just for practitioners. This
Hmm.
is for everyone because we talked again, like there's such mundane things that we do and we don't realize how much of a ripple they cause.
Yeah.
I had a client recently that said that she felt really, and I hope she's okay with this, but I'm not going to say her name, of course. But she said she felt really restricted or like forced by a former mentor who was like, you take some information because it's sacred, but you need to be of service and share. And she's like, I
Hmm.
just didn't feel right with that. And she's like, I'm being of service with my husband, with my children. And I was like, well, that's your community, honey.
Right.
You start there. You start what's closest. It's up to you what you feel comfortable with. One person's idea of community may mean something else to somebody else. One
Hmm.
idea of village could just mean your family. Again, this is language. So when people say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, well, this work helps you tune into what feels right for you rather than what is out there that you see that you
Hmm.
feel you're supposed to do. If that was a
Right.
long way of answering that question, but I
Right.
hope it
No,
does.
it makes perfect sense, especially, I mean, and the struggle is real, even like trying to figure out where you fit. Because I remember when I first worked with you, I was struggling with the idea, like I was between, like I had just left being a full-time yoga teacher, and I was like, I feel like I keep drifting from place to place, and I never end up anywhere, and I don't fit in anywhere. And the most soothing balm you could have ever given me was you said, no, of course not. You're the bridge. You're the glue. You bring people together so you don't have to fit in anywhere. And I was like, thank God, because I've been trying so hard to find the group or the community or where I'm supposed to serve that it never occurred to me that maybe that's not what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of us that feel that way. And I feel like that, like, movement, that discovery, that navigation, that's like such an important part of it. Because what we're really doing is we're navigating ourselves, right? We're going,
Mm.
this works for me in here, but not so
Mhm.
much. And this works for me, but not so much. And what it really does is it puts us in tune with like who we are. And I think
Right.
that's like the big thing that a lot of people are missing. So we all become like, these wanderers, and we're like, I don't know why I'm wandering. Well, you're wandering because you're on this heroic journey to find the self, to find the
Right.
hero within. And, it took me a long time to recognize that. And, again, I am seeing it's really cool because I see in the spiritual community or the quote wellness industry, which is I was like dying because my Hermetic Kabbalah teacher was like, wellness? Like, we're not well. And I'm like, you're right, we're not well. She's like, we're all crazy. And I was like, oh yeah. But I'm seeing a lot of language that
Hmm.
it does mirror each other, right? It's all marketing for the most part.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think that what it does is it's not as like nasty as that sounds. I think that some people go into it with the intention of feeling good and helping others, and they see a word and they go, "Oh, that invoked a feeling. Well, I want other people to have that same feeling."
Hmm.
But a lot that I've seen is like there's this great remembering happening, right? Like the new shift, right? But it's not wrong. I've seen recently a lot of people are giving like Akashic attunements or uh, classes to help you with your own like psychic ability. And it's really, for me, I think that's really cool to see because again, like all of us have our own different filter. We connect to different other people, right? And so
Hmm.
the word of mouth is going to go out, and whoever is attracted to whichever practitioner is going to connect. But I asked, I was like, well, I'm seeing all of this. And old Sophia would have been like, fuck, everyone's doing what I'm doing. But doing this practice, I'm like, okay, we're on the same vibe. There's this wave of information coming in.
Hmm.
What sets me apart? What makes me different? And they said, well, honey, you're the navigator. You help people navigate this. And I thought about how I never felt like I was a part of any group, and I always felt like an outsider. And that navigation aspect of it made me feel so strong within myself. And I think that's a very big missing piece in understanding how to create your own definitions and connections and understanding the language of your own field. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm so excited about this work. I'm having a hard time staying centered because I'm just so stoked right now.
But I think what you just said, it leads to something so important, at least for me, which is deep, radical self-compassion. Because
Yes.
old me would have berated me for not being able to like adhere to a group, to adhere to a course or a mentor or to any of these things. And now my mantra is kind of like, I am that I am. This is just showing me another aspect of myself. And how great is that? To be
Yeah.
able to just do this thing that I love.
Yeah, and you touched on compassion, and it really makes me think, like going back to that question about ego and, separation of the two. And I said, I think this mystic path allows us to look at ego and see its place. I think
Hmm.
there's compassion there. And ultimately, throughout all of the mystic work that I do, again, bhakti is the center of my work. We live in such a world that is like, what do you provide? What do you
Right.
do? Where are you going? And there's a lot of this self-talk and pressure
Hmm.
of you should know better, we should get it, like you need to do this, you need to do that. We see it constantly even in the spiritual like community,
Hmm.
like you need to be doing this or you need to respect that. And there's just like, where's the room for grace? Where's the room
Right.
for compassion? Where do we create that space? When I all a lot of this information, a lot of this practice came through when I had like the major panic attack, and I felt like so completely just batshit crazy. Like I felt so disconnected to myself. But that disconnection allowed for a space of just letting go of control for a minute. We're
Hmm.
constantly needing to be in control. What happens if we create space to see what happens?
Right.
There's a quote that Carl Jung uses by another person. It's not Swedenborg, it's somebody, but they talk about like lunacy. And they say,
Hmm.
as far as like somebody being quote crazy, if it has something to do with their health, like there's an importance to that, and that should be taken care of. But we have to remember there's like a divine part of that that allows space for information to come through. Like you're not
Hmm.
going to sound put together when you get this information, right? So I think we're there. You have to have a level of compassion for yourself when you get this kind of information, and so you have to start somewhere, and starting
Hmm.
somewhere has to be like, you know, when I did that thing when I was in fifth grade and that was embarrassing, I was just a kid. I didn't know. I don't need to be up at 4 in the morning thinking about this while I'm looking for my
Yeah.
birth certificate. You know, it's like little things like that. And it really,
Hmm.
those small practices build up into the bigger ones. And I want people to connect to that and recognize that that compassion goes so far in this spiritual work. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're like, oh, I see you, thank you for sharing. It
Right.
is radical. It is radical to give it to ourselves first. It's
Hmm.
hard, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you, when people are coming to this, do you call it a course, a class?
I call it curriculum.
Curriculum.
um Curriculum, yeah.
That sounds much better. When people are coming to the curriculum,
Yeah.
what do you see them journeying toward, for each individual? If there could be like a generalization of what they're moving toward.
They're just, I think the most simplified way of defining this is exercising trust.
Hmm.
Um, and I say exercising because you're not going to come out of this class and go, I trust myself. You have to create a practice. All of this is practice. You know, like being a psychic medium, I do have to practice. I do have to get to
Hmm.
know who I am working with, where I'm at, where I'm going. It's all a practice. So I think this comes down to trusting yourself, trusting, you know, your guides, trusting those breadcrumbs, the language, the call, and in trusting, you move the marker of limitation, right?
Hmm.
So this trust does reflect in your physical life, not just with trusting in your relationships, but going, maybe I don't need to be in this job. Maybe I can start a business. Maybe I can do this. Maybe because you're trusting the signs, the symbols, and the support that you are getting. And you know, ultimately, one of the things I was talking to my husband about this last night. We were watching this new show on HBO Max about the guy who started the Lakers, and he's
Hmm.
like doing a deal, and he's like, I don't have this $15 million. And I said, one of the most amazing things that rich people do and people in these big positions do that other people don't realize is they usually don't know or don't have the money. They quote like wing it, but they move
Hmm.
resources. And so this is like trusting how you can move the resources within yourself and then like
Hmm.
outwardly into your world. Like, how can I move the resources? You're never going to be ready. So how can I move the
Right.
resources so I feel a little more comfortable so I can take a chance? So that's what I think people will get out of this is like trusting that trust, exercising
Yeah, and
trust.
maybe
Bring.
taking the foot off the throttle a little bit. I think what trips people up a lot is that they're
Mhm.
going full speed ahead and they're trying all the things
Oh,
all at once. So they never even get the
yeah.
opportunity of grace, of space to see, like, oh, maybe not this, maybe not that. Maybe I could just do this one thing.
Yeah, or listening to themselves. You know, a lot of us, we get so caught up in doing all these courses with other practitioners, and we're like, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do
Yeah.
it? Well, this, though it is another course or curriculum, this is saying, like, well, how do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Bringing you back to your voice. You can't, like, bog yourself down with all these books and practices and lessons if you're not actively working on it in connection with yourself. And does that feel right for you?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, some of this trust is also embodiment. How does it feel in your body? What feels good to
Mm-hmm.
you? A lot of, you know, there's practitioners out there that don't even know like a simple yes or no what that feels like in their body.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this brings us all back to center, like your path to your level of pathways. It's like an airport, you know. You
Right.
go on a trip, you come back, and then you'll go down the next corridor and go on your next trip. But this is going to help you. This is like your passport, help you understand where you're going and how you're going to get there.
I'll say though that a person taking this course probably needs a lot of courage at first to stand on that threshold, because a lot of these things we do, like the constant taking of courses, even though they're good for our health, are actual distractions to the bigger work.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, anybody who is called to this course, you're called for a reason, and that's the
Mm.
first like ping. If that's what you
Mm.
feel like, then go for it. I'm not going to push this course where like everybody needs to take it, because I think there's a certain level of like releasing the intellect and the lower self in order to like step into this trust. And if you're not ready for that, you're just not going to be ready. You're not
Mhm.
going to get everything that you need in this class. And as far as the attunement is concerned, again, this is bringing you in harmony with the stuff that is already in your
Mm.
field. So if you're not ready for it, I mean, it's not going to, it's going to be a little
Over.
choppy. so yeah,
Shock therapy.
yeah, right. It's going to be like, I don't know about that one. like, so I think that, yeah, there's going to be a level of courage, but there's got to be a level of like, I'm ready. I'm ready for
Mm.
this.
Yeah, I guess the courage part kind of falls away when you know about
Yeah.
something,
I
when
don't know if
something
it falls
pings for
away.
you.
Sometimes it's like,
Well,
please
yeah.
stay here beside me, even though I know.
All right, that's fair. It's still there. It's just muffled a little.
Yeah.
So
Um,
when does the course start?
so the course will start, actually, let me look at my calendar. Sorry. The course will start in April. So your listeners will have the first like access. You'll be hearing it first because I'm not going to be talking about it until March 17th. The
Mhm.
first class will start April 16th, which is the start of Gibafal, which is, or Counting Omer. So I think it's kind of in the same body or world of Lent, but
Mhm.
in Kabbalah, it is a practice of the different spheres on the tree of life. So practicing mercy, practicing helping somebody, not complaining. It's a practice,
Mhm.
right? And so what you're doing is you're giving up a piece of something that's not really helpful for yourself.
Mhm.
Um, Not that we're necessarily doing this while we're doing the class. I just think symbolically, what we're doing is we're giving up, we're surrendering
Mhm.
to ourself. Now on my Patreon, I may be doing this practice, but actually, I will be doing this practice because I tried to complain, not to complain for a week, and that was life changing. It was
I
hard,
am
but it was.
practicing. I'm actually practicing Lent this year. I started just after Ash Wednesday. But instead of giving up, because I'm very good at giving things up,
Mhm.
I decided to take something on instead. So I started my bhakti practice again every morning for 40 days. And
Oh,
then I'm
that's
trying to
cool.
see how things fall away when I add this thing that nourishes. Right?
That's
So,
amazing. I love that. That's very cool.
so they start on, what did you call the holiday again, or the day?
So Geba Fall, or Counting Omer. So it's April 16th would be on a
Mhm.
Saturday. So I will offer the gateway first. So that will be the class of language, individuation, the nature of your system. Then it's class 2 attunement, and class 3 is learning, opening, closing, and warding. And now when
Mhm.
we learn the opening, closing, and warding, this is information you're pulling from yourself and your guides, not from me. I can give
Mhm.
you help, but we will be doing the vibrational retrieval of this. So the gateway are those three classes. I will be offering that first. Um, the second part of it, the King's Ties of the seven angelical spheres, or the tagline I haven't come up with yet, but this alchemical marriage or resolution of the archetypes within ourselves. That I will probably do in the summertime, maybe around summer solstice. Um, but the gateway will need to be done first in order to do the
Okay.
second.
What's the commitment, both physically, time-wise, for this for the entire curriculum, or is it kind of open?
Um, yeah, it's well, so focusing on the gateway, the three main
Mhm,
classes, it will be a couple nights a week, for
mhm,
about 3 weeks. We'll be finishing before Mercury retrograde, which I think is May 10th. So, it will be a couple hours, 2 nights a week, because I do want there to be time in between for you to adjust to the energy, integrate it, and allow things to come through in your waking life as well. Because this vibrational attunement is going to pull some information that you might not get while we are in, our journeying section of the class.
mhm,
Um, what you get with this as well is you get a like 50% off a one-on-one mentoring session. So, we'll work together for an hour to talk about, how you want to adjust your opening or your closing, or what might be coming through that you're having a little trouble with. I think
mhm,
that is also missing in a lot of curriculum or classes that I'm seeing is the pure on mentorship together. Um,
mhm,
so if you are fully committed to this, I'm fully committed to you as well, to guide you and
mhm,
to help you or to be an ear. Um, so two classes, couple hours a week, for about a little less than a month, about 3 weeks.
mhm,
And I will be offering you'll have connection to my Patreon. So not only will you get everything that's on my Patreon as part of your payment, but also um, you will get like live Q&As. So like
mhm.
office hours. So there's a lot of support for you to learn to trust. Like I'm going to be your training wheels in doing this.
It's beautiful, because it feels more like an intensive, right? It's not like one class and then 2 weeks later you have another and then another hour. So it does feel like very, like, almost like an incubator, right? Until
Yeah,
you like
or
go through this thing.
yeah, and it's funny. I used the word incubator before, and I was talking to my friend that does some of my like content management for like bigger things, and he's like, "I really don't like incubators," and I'm like, "Well, this is what it feels like." But it also makes me think, especially because language is such a big part of this, is
Mhm,
immersion.
mhm.
We're
Yeah.
throwing you in there. You're learning the language, and you're learning by being, which I
Mhm.
think is really cool.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. So if they're feeling that ping, where can they go to find out more information?
So I will be releasing this March 17th and be opening enrollment until uh, re until it feels full. I don't want to have too many people in the class because again, I do want to be able to do the one-on-ones and
Mhm.
be able to support everybody appropriately. So they can go to my website, Divine Void Sophia, and they can sign up. They can go to my Instagram. There will be a link for enrollment under my link tree.
Perfect. And we'll put all that information in the show notes. I keep saying
Awesome.
we, and like it's more than me. And I was just having this conversation. I was like, I like to speak about me and spirit are
I was
doing
gonna
this.
say, well, like technically, yeah, you are a we and I am a we, and we are all we. So for sure, you're never alone and you're never doing
Yeah.
anything alone.
I'm going to continue to use that pronoun.
Yes. Yes, actually, I might add that she, her, we.
They wouldn't let me actually on Instagram. They didn't. I
Really?
tried to put, yeah, we, they, and it doesn't. So,
Oh,
but let me know if it works out.
okay, well.
Well, thanks again for coming on. You're
Awesome.
welcome back, obviously, anytime. And I'm looking forward to your new curriculum.
Awesome. Thank you so much for letting me chat and talk about this and I'm really excited that your viewers and listeners get like the first dibs to this and it's always a pleasure to talk with you because it's like talking to an old friend. I love it.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.